advent of code. So we've done, in part one, we've solved the problem one in both Replit and in Vim. Here, we're just going to stick to Replit so I can more easily show, code and running and experimenting. We're going to look at a more sophisticated approach to reading the data and solving the problem. The more sophisticated approach to solving the problem is probably a bit much for beginners, so I just hope it's of interest, even if you don't follow it. But the more sophisticated approach to reading the data should be something that everybody would implement. So just to remind you, we've got the main.py, which is here. We've got a data directory, and each day's data is going in there, and there's one for test and there's one for real. Okay, so I'll get rid of this now. We don't need to see that. So one thing I don't like about the way we're reading data is that this function P01 should just be focused on solving the problem. I don't want to be typing in file names. I don't even want to be opening files. I don't want to be stripping lines. Okay, so I want support for all this, and that support's going to come from a function, right? And so basically, I'm going to create a function, input lines, whose job it is. So I just give it a number, like what day it is, and its job is to determine the file name, open the file, get rid of the lines, get rid of the new lines, and just give me back a list of strings. So I'm going to say file name equals a formatted string data / n dot text. And now, I'm demonstrating here a good way of just testing a little bit at a time, right? So if I run this, then I can type input lines 1. Okay, and I get data / 1 dot text, and if I want, I can, do 99, right? Whatever. Now, the problem is, I'm not calling it 1 dot text, I'm calling it 01 dot text, right? So that's a simple change, probably not known to many people, but that will do the job, okay? So if I run that, and now input lines 1, okay, that's better. All right, now, problem is, what if I want to run the test file? So I'm going to put a parameter here. I'm going to assume that it's false. And so now I need to say if it's testing, right? And then otherwise this. So here's the otherwise bit. There's the real one. I'll just make a copy and paste and make a slight adjustment and put that in, and I should now have the right file name. All right, so I'll just show you how I can run that. So I can have input lines 1, and well, if I put 1, then I get that. If I put test equals true, then I get that. And I don't have to put the test equals. I can just put 1 comma true. Thing is though, looked at in isolation, like if I just handed that code to someone, it's a bit hard for them to know what the true is talking about. Not very descriptive, so I prefer that. But anyway, so I've got the file name. Okay, I don't want to return it. I want to actually open the file. So I'm going to say with open file name for reading as F. I'm going to return. I could go return f.readlines. Okay, let's test this much. So if I go input lines 1, oops. Right, I need to spell that correctly. Okay, there we go. Right, now there's all those new lines. I want to get rid of those, but first let me just try. Okay, and there's the testing one. Okay, so obviously I don't want the new lines. I want to do, on a return x.split for x in f.readlines. One more little test. Okay. Oh, Oh, I said split, I mean strip. Okay, that's why it's worth doing a little bit of testing each time to check that things are working. Check that you've done the right thing. There we go, I've done the right thing. And if I put test equals true, then I get the test data. Okay, so input lines is good. I'll just put a comment above here. So return a list of strings that are lines from the input file with new lines removed. It obtains data from the real input or the test input as determined by the test parameter. All right, there we go. And now I can change this by, instead of opening the file here and all that, okay, get rid of these two lines and just have lines equals input lines 1. Right, I'm doing problem 1, so I get input lines 1. Now, thing is, what if I want to do the test? So what I really want is, okay, so I'm going to run this and just check that P01 works. There we go, I get the same results I did before. But how do I make it do the test? Well, I'd like to be able to do this here, okay? And at the moment that doesn't work because this is not expecting a parameter. So I'm going to say test equals false. So by default we'll run the real file. And now when I run this, oops, P01 test equals true. Okay, I get those results. I get the same results whether I type that or not because it's accepting the parameter but it's not doing anything with it. All I need to do is pass that on, okay? And just a quick check, P01, there we go. P01 test equals true. Different results. We get the results for the test file. Okay, so that feels like progress. I'm not typing in file names. I'm not mucking around with testing or not. And also, I don't need to strip that because it's already been done. Okay, so just a quick check that P01 is still good. Okay, so that feels good, right? My P01 is now more focused on actually solving the problem and less focused on files and stripping and so on. Right, there's one more improvement I'm going to make. And I'll just make the point when we go to P02, of course, I'm going to go lines equals input lines to test, and I'm going to put this in here. Okay, so for a small amount of effort, that is taking a parameter for each of my problem functions, I get like that nice interface of being able to run the problem with either the test or the real data. Okay, all right, back to problem 1. Last thing for this video, let's see how long it's going to take. This bit of code here is doing two things at once, okay? It is checking for new line, checking for blank lines, and it is like adding up the values in there, okay? Not a big problem, but as you get better at programming, you look for opportunities to separate out concerns. So this business of running through all the lines in the file and running through all the lines in the file and looking out for blank lines, that's basically separating it into paragraphs, isn't it? Okay, I'm using the word paragraphs as if it were text because the contents of a file is text. It's not a number until we make it a number like here. So I'm going to assume that some other time in this advent of code, I'm going to need to break the input into paragraphs. And so what I want to do is not have that mixed in with the business of like adding up the calories. So I'm going to make a function, def paragraphs. Right, we're going to feed it some lines, and I don't think it would need to take anything else. And what it's going to do is every time it's going to keep reading. All right, so well, let's just have a look. What's the paragraph reading code here? We have the sums array, and when there's a blank line, we append something to the array, and that something is built up here. Okay, so these two things, they're like interleaved, right? So what I'm going to do is have a paragraph. All right, I'll just make a comment. So split the lines into paragraphs. Okay. I don't know why there's an indent there. A paragraph is a list of lines. I can think of ways I could improve the comment, but I'm not going to do that while I'm recording a video. So we start with an empty paragraph. We do for line in lines. Wrong button. We see if the line is empty, then we do one thing. Otherwise, we do another thing. Right, what are the things that we do? Well, if the line's not empty, then the current paragraph needs to get that line, okay? If the line's not empty, then we have an actual line of text, add it to the current paragraph. Okay, I don't really think there's anything else we do here. I think the else part is complete. If the line is empty, then our paragraph is complete and we need to do something with it. So I could do this, answer equals that, and I could say answer dot append paragraph, the current paragraph, and now set the paragraph to an empty list because we need to build up a new paragraph. And at the end of this, I'm going to say return answer. Okay. So now let me do this, right? So I need some lines, all right? So I'll say lines equals input lines 1 test equals true. All right, so what does lines look like? Looks like that. And now I'm going to run paragraphs on the lines. And I've got, there's one paragraph, there's another paragraph, there's another paragraph, and there's another, okay? Okay, so that's good, right? But I'm gonna just make one change, and that is rather than return a list of paragraphs, I'm going to yield one paragraph at a time. So I'm not building up the answer, okay? I'm not doing this. I am yielding the paragraph, and I'm not returning the answer. So I just made this code simpler. This code cares only about one thing, what the current paragraph is, appending the line to the paragraph, and then spitting it out when we're done. That's a good thing, right? Problem is, some of you don't really know what this yield is, or if you do know it, you're not really comfortable enough to use it yourself. So let me demonstrate what just happened then. Okay, so I've got my lines equals input lines 1 true. So I get that. And then if I do paragraphs from lines, then I don't get a list back, I get a generator, right? And let me just demonstrate what happens with that. So I'll just call that anything, I'll just call it X, right? And if I say X, all I get is that. Like, what's that? Well, I can call next on that and see, I get a paragraph, right? The rest of the paragraphs haven't been generated yet. When I call next, it goes, oh, I better read some more lines and make another paragraph. Okay, I better make some more lines and make another paragraph. Okay, so this allows me to separate the producing of the paragraphs from the consuming of them. Very powerful. And when there are no more, you get an error called stop iteration, right? And the thing is, we don't normally call it next one at a time. What we do, right, get a fresh generator. We say for p in x, and I'm going to print p, and there we go, right? We iterate through the paragraphs, right, with a for loop. And so that now allows us to iterate through paragraphs. Right, how does that change my, my code here? Well, I don't have a, well, basically, you know what? I'm going to rewrite this for loop from scratch, because I'm not going to edit this for loop because it's doing too much. It's doing two things at once, and the two things are interrelated. Now I can tease them apart. I can say for p in paragraphs lines. Right, now I'm going to be given one paragraph at a time. And I can say total calories equals the sum of the lines, right? The lines have integers in them, right? Sorry, the sum of the things in the paragraph. The thing is, they're not integers, they're strings. So I'll just say sum of int x for x in p. I'm going to call this paragraph just to be a bit clearer, okay? So I've now got the total calories. What am I going to do with it? Well, I suppose I need to keep that in a list. So I can say, I don't know, l.append total calories. Okay, and so L needs to be that. Right, I'm going to delete. Okay, I'm going to delete that. So I've built now my array was called sums before. All right, I'll change it to sums. Okay, so the maximum of sums is answer 1A, and then the last sorting and all that. So that business of generating a list of all the sums is now 4 lines long. Okay, because the code to split it into paragraphs is separate. All I need to do is decide what to do with each paragraph, and that is convert them to an integer and add them, and then append it to the sums. All right, it's time to test this. So I'll just run p01, and it works as before. Okay, and I don't really need to do the test, but just all right. Now that's a nice improvement, right? I've got paragraphs. I can just decide what to do with each paragraph. But you know what? There's a pattern here that I can reduce even further. If you are setting an empty list and then looping over something and appending to that list, you can do this in a list comprehension. So I can do sums equals make a list, right? And I can say total calories for a given paragraph for para in paragraphs lines. Right, so this is like the same sort of code here, although I've now made a function here, right, which will do that. So I'll create that in a sec. So total, and because I've now got 1 line instead of 4, I feel comfortable calling this p instead of, because it says for p in paragraph, right? So I want the total calories for each paragraph, right? But then if I create def total calories here, So I have a paragraph as input, and what I'm going to do is just return the sum of int x for x in para. Okay, that's long enough that I'd like it to be a function here rather than like a comprehension within a comprehension. That's just a bit too confusing. Right, so the 4 lines of code here, including a blank, is equivalent to the 4 lines of code here. And you are perfectly welcome to make the conclusion that you think this is clearer and you prefer it. Okay, I'm just going to go with this and see if I like it. I think I do. You can define a function within a function in Python. I really like that feature. This total calories is of no use to anyone except this function. I seem to have lost some code. Right. I deleted a paragraph, but because this stupid thing, right, now if I delete that paragraph, it only deletes that. Okay, that's REPL's fault. Okay, run this, P01, okay, boom. All right, so this is the code that it's running. Right, the sums is the total calories for each paragraph, and then we just get the maximum, and then we get the top 3. Okay, so I'm going to end it here. I hope that this is at least interesting for you, and hopefully even more than interesting, but actually useful, something that you can apply. Whether you apply all of it or not, it's up to you. But definitely this paragraphs is really nice, because any problems that come my way now that require me to split it into paragraphs, then I've got the code for that ready to go. Okay, so have a nice day.